audio. Sorry about that. Now, life as metaphor. And what that's all about is that life often, the circumstances of life often reflect our inner state or our inner process. We get to talk about how that shows up. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to settle in and get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, into your cells, into your organs, nourishing and invigorating and enlivening. And as you exhale, exhale any stress, any tension. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light just lighting you up, flowing into all the electrons, all the molecules, nourishing, revitalizing, enlightening every portion of your being and beyond. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, any stress. And now let's just gently press our palms together and really softly rub your fingers against your palms and feel the tingling and the tickling and that delicious, delightful sensation of actually being here in a physical body. And welcome, welcome, welcome. So hello, soul traveler, welcome. Great to have you here with us today, and welcome to everybody else. Today we are talking about life as metaphor. So I remember years and years ago, I was friends with this person who was a big time energy healer in Norway, actually. And one of the things that he would say is everything is symbolic and nothing is symbolic. And as we look into our lives, I think we often have circumstances where the experiences or the circumstances of our lives mirror our internal state. And Soul Traveler says, we wear our bodies like a spacesuit. Yes, I think that's really true. And our bodies are the vehicle through which we experience life. So we can't be separate from our bodies, and we can't identify ourselves as living beings without recognizing that our body is integral to our experience and our expression. And welcome, Hope. Good afternoon to you. So glad to have you joining us. So while we wear our bodies, we are of our bodies as well. And I think we make a mistake sometimes to be creating that separation. You know, we're spirit embodied in physical form, and as spirit embodied in physical form, we also are physical form. You know, this is the vehicle for our experience. So everything that we think, everything that we feel, everything we experience is through this physicalness that we are manifesting. And so I think that there's a unity of body and spirit that we can get to that brings us perhaps in greater harmony with our physicalness. But you gave a great metaphor, Soul Traveler, like that our bodies are like a spacesuit. They are our interface with the universe and also with consciousness. So anyway, talking about metaphor, so Soul Traveler says, this world is a projection of a timeless dimension. I agree with you there. I agree. And it's interesting to be finding our way through this projection, right? And that's where this idea of metaphor comes in, because we can have all kinds of experience. Good health to you too, Soul Traveler. We can have this experience of, let's say, here's a great example, actually. Good morning, Dido. Welcome, welcome. Great to have you here, as always. Here's an example. I remember hearing a story about a friend who in her family, in her relationship, there were lots of unspoken emotions. So there was this real intense emotional turmoil that was sort of bubbling under the surface. And at one point, all the plumbing in the house just exploded, and they had a flood in the house. And water is a symbol of emotion. So interesting, like this is where life shows up as metaphor, right? And it probably does on so many levels that we just don't even catch, that we're not even awake to. But that was one example. Another example was just another person, actually it might have been the same person, just really powerful emotions for this person, but feeling like their world was just, they wanted to change, and they just really wanted to start over, and their house caught on fire and burnt down, and they had to start over. So they were really, in a way, metaphorically wanting to burn down their old life, and they actually did. I mean, she didn't set the fire or anything, but you know it's interesting, life as metaphor. And some of us live more in that metaphorical realm than others, but I'm sure we all have examples of situations that have really mirrored our our internal state, or have played back and forth with that internal state. So I'm wondering if you have any examples of that you can think of in your own life. I'm trying to think of some other ones. uh, I know I know when we're feeling exhausted, that I don't know about you, but one one thing that I've noticed in my history before I got wise to it was that I would push myself and push myself and push myself until I just couldn't go any further. And what would happen is I'd get sick, so that I ended up staying in bed. And what was going on was I was sick and tired. So I actually ended up being sick and tired. Now I notice, or now I recognize that pattern. I don't have to do that to that extreme anymore. I can be feeling like I need a break, and I will allow myself to stay in bed all day if that's what I need. And so that's where I can be tired, and I don't have to be sick. And Soul Traveler saying nothing happens in a vacuum. Synchronicity, exactly. So synchronicity, talking about life as metaphor, and everything being symbolic and nothing being symbolic. So maybe well, I don't know why this is coming to mind at the moment, but it was really, really powerful experience for me. I was sitting on my front stoop one day, and there was this woman that I had never seen before. She really looked like an archetypal, um, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but the crone, or the hag, like the old wise sage woman, and which has typically been depicted in a not so beautiful form. This woman was kind of hunched, and was wearing kind of dowdy clothing, and she was walking very, very slowly with a cane, and I was sitting on my stoop, and at that time I was really meditating on being connected, on being the world, being everything and everyone. And I was just present to the love and connection in that moment. And I was seeing this woman and seeing myself as that woman, and seeing her as me. And she stopped right in front of on the sidewalk as she was walking. She stopped right in front of my house and turned to me and said, "I love you." and just kept walking. And I was dumbfounded. But life as metaphor, like here, life was reflecting itself back to me, was reflecting my inner state back to me. So synchronicity, you could call it. We could call it confirmation. We could call it metaphor. Um, in that case, it was pretty literal. But here's another really funny story, actually. There was a time I was feeling I was feeling pretty lost, and I just wanted confirmation, that I was going in the right direction. And honestly, this was the wildest thing. I started smelling smoke, and I'm running around looking for where this smoke might be. I go outside, and in front of where I live, there are these bushes, and this bush was smoking. So I had a burning bush in my front yard, and I have a photograph of these 3 firemen in their yellow suit and the fire truck in the background, and them pouring water on this burning bush. And I was like, if you need a confirmation, if you need a message that you're on the right path, what better way to have that than a burning bush, right? That was such an amazing thing. And I'm wondering, it was crazy. So, yeah, wow, indeed. It was really crazy, but that's life as metaphor, right? Like here, I wanted a message, I needed a message, and here, I mean, that's a pretty explicit message, right? So if you choose to see it, it could just be a burning bush, like everything is symbolic and nothing is symbolic. But I chose to um, to embrace it as a burning bush and as a message. So it didn't talk to me in overt words, but I got the experience of it. That's one of the funniest things that's ever happened, I would say. That cracked me up. I mean, still to this day, I'm awed by it. But we do get, speaking of messages, so I just have to share this. Not that it's part of the life as metaphor thing, but it's pretty awesome. Um, my dad passed away a couple years ago, and my brother and my dad, and I don't usually name names here, but this is just so awesome. My brother and my dad were really, really close. And my brother's just going through a really wonderful transition in his life. And yesterday was a big event in that context. And he got a phone call, and on his phone, it said dad. And the call didn't go through or anything. It didn't, it stopped ringing, but it said dad. And my brother said how freaked out he was that my dad showed up to let him know he was there. And he said he would have been so happy for me at this point in life, and so pleased to see this. And I said, well, he is. And so it could have been a wrong number, or it could have been our dad showing up to say hey. And I had something really similar happen uh, on my dad's birthday. I was thinking about him and missing him, and I got this phone call. I've spoken about it here before. I got this phone call, and I picked up the phone, which I don't usually do for calls that I don't know the number to, or if I don't know who the caller is. But I picked up the phone, and the person said hi. I said hi, and they said it's me. I said, who's that? And the guy said, it's dad. And obviously it was not my dad in that voice, but it was I said, I think you might have the wrong number. And then he asked me if it was his daughter's name, and I said no. And but it was my dad. My dad found a way to call and say hello when I was thinking of him on his birthday. At least that's the message that I took. So it could be metaphorically that my dad did that. It could be actually, I can call it symbolic or not symbolic. It could be a wrong number. So, what kinds of experiences, and they don't have to be this dramatic either. I mean, I've had experiences where I crashed my car or got in a car accident, and that also can be a metaphor. Like I felt like, you know, I was wrecked. You know, like I felt at odds in the world at that time and crashed my car. Well, car is sort of a symbol of our self and our being, and crashing the car was kind of like a you know, a wake up call to see that I was a bit of a wreck at that time, you know. So Soul Traveler says messages from a higher dimension. Yeah. So when I say life as metaphor, it is really to be reading the signs that are with us all the time. And the things that we notice are also signs for other things that are maybe going on inside of us, and an opportunity to um, wake up to different awarenesses of things, right? So maybe if we, I'm just trying to think of some other examples. And Soul Traveler says, usually when I'm open to them, yes, they're all over the place all the time. You know, it's just like kind of when we learn how to read, when we're first learning how to read, what we see is symbols that don't have any particular meaning. We don't know how to interpret them. We don't know how to put them together into um, relate them to words, right? We're reading these symbols on the page. We're interpreting these symbols. We're ascribing meaning to them, and then we're extracting a bigger meaning when all these symbols are assembled in particular ways. And I am inclined to think that we're surrounded by similar signs and symbols. It's just a matter of learning how to read, first to recognize them, to even know that there's a symbol there, and then to be able to interpret it. So another place that life as metaphor kind of works, if we're talking about symbols and meaning, is in astrology, right? We see patterns, and that's what Soul Traveler is saying. We see patterns. So in astrology, for example, I have had an experience with an astrologer who was incredibly accurate. Not all people are, but there are some very interesting parallels or accuracies or indicators that we can benefit from when we allow ourselves to tune in. And you know, if we think about people who read astrology charts really effectively, Soul Travelers saying they connect the dots or connect the dots, that's exactly what they do. So they're able to tap into this realm of understanding of how these different symbols and signs work together as a guidepost or a metaphor or an indicator. And so astrology is one arena, but you could also think, and I haven't had this experience, but I've heard of people who can read tea leaves or who can read bones. And, you know, it's not so different in a way from people who can track, you know, people who track animals, for instance. They can see the different signs, or people who track people, people who, you know, are just able to read nature, to read the signs that indicate a storm coming, for example. Hello, Liliane. Wonderful, wonderful to see you. Let me see. Oh, you got into the other live, but your comments didn't show, so you're trying here. That's awesome. I'm great. I'm grateful that you're trying here. That's awesome. And I'm glad to see you. I don't know why the comments sometimes show and sometimes don't. Very odd. Anyway, we're talking about life as metaphor and symbols and signs, and how really those symbols and signs uh, show up when we allow ourselves to be attuned to them. I'm inclined to think that they're all around us all the time, and it's just a matter of tuning in to have a greater connection to them. So, for instance, some people use cards or tarot cards to trigger um, an awareness or an entree into this world of metaphor and signs and symbols. Oh, geez, Liliane says she wrote a lot of comments in the other place. I'm sorry to miss them. And for anybody who's writing comments that I'm not seeing, I apologize. I'm pretty much responding to the comments that I see. So if you're not being responded to, Liliane, where are you logged in? Um, where you're writing the comments? Are you on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page writing comments, or are you on my page? Maybe that'll help me guide people in the future. Anyway, um, I think this is such a fun topic because it connects us to a bigger picture. It connects us to the unity of all things and what we can call the holographic universe, where everything reflects everything else on some level, and the microcosm reflects the macrocosm, vice versa. And so our internal world is reflected back to us externally, and we're reflecting the external world from within. So Liliane says, it's too long since I've been here. Sorry, I've been sick with migraine every night and no sleep and a sick mother to lift, so been a bit too much. And Liliane says it was my personal page that didn't show the comments. So if you want to write comments, go to the Enlightened World Network Facebook page, and that will work as far as the comments. So yeah, thank you, Soul Traveler. And Liliane, I'm so sorry you've been going through such a difficult time, and the migraines and your mom, and it is a lot. So I hope you're doing everything you can for self-care. And I just wish you grace and ease as much as you can find for your mom and for yourself. So, yeah. So the migraines, when we can look at our physicalness also as a reflection of emotion. So, certainly, Liliane, you're experiencing lots of intensity right now in your life, and that's probably experiencing some constriction, and it's a real headache to have to take care of your mom in a certain way, like as much as you may love and be devoted to her, the migraine is, it's a headache, right? And I don't, I have had a couple migraines, thankfully not too many, and I know how debilitating they can be. And the other thing about those migraines is, I don't know about for you, but they made it so I couldn't do much of anything else. And I'm wondering if that's the case for you, or if you're fighting through and still doing what you need to do despite the migraine. I think the thing that I was talking about earlier for myself is that when I pushed myself super hard, I wouldn't give myself the freedom to take the rest that I needed. I made it be such an extreme situation that I got sick and couldn't get out of bed. And now, instead of getting to that point where I ended up in bed for days and feeling miserable, when I'm tired, I let myself stay in bed all day if I need to. And I give myself the rest without having to give myself the excuse that a valid excuse that I'm too sick to get out of bed. And wow. So you've had your migraine since you were 7. I wonder, have you had the occasion to work on emotional elements around that? I know migraines can be triggered hormonally too. So I'm guessing that since you've been living with this all your life, you've looked into all different ways to deal with it. But I would look at the emotional component, and if you haven't already, I presume you have, and the hormonal piece. Um, and also food allergies, by the way, but you probably know all those things already. Anyway, life as metaphor. It's kind of fun if you're awake to, oh my gosh, look at that. It's reflective of something else in my own life. So when we pay attention, even to like our physical sensations, uh, when we allow the physical sensations, or we recognize the physical sensations, a lot of times, probably all of the time, there is some element of um, emotional, there's always an emotional component. I don't speak in always and never that much, but I will, I will venture to say that there's always an emotional component to physical manifestation. And in fact, Louise Hay has a whole book about the association of different physical ailments with different emotional states. And I believe it's called You Can Heal Your Life. And Liliane, I'm guessing you may have already been familiar with that, but it might be helpful. And addressing the emotional piece. I mean, you've got a lot of emotion going on around your situation, but the headache is also metaphorical. I mean, obviously it's really real and physical, but it's also metaphorical. So yes, I've tried a lot, but nothing helps, Liliane says, but I've always had that much on my shoulders. So there is a ton, I'm sure. It sounds like you do have a lot on your shoulders. And Soul Traveler says, I found at times observation of my life from a different perspective, a silent observer. And that goes back to your comment, have you ever experienced dissociation from your pain? So that's actually, thank you for that, Soul Traveler. That's a really, really powerful technique, is to sort of be able to step back and see yourself, observe yourself, rather than being in the midst of the experience, to be able to observe the experience. And that's a way that we can distance ourselves metaphorically from our trauma and pain, for example. So I figured you did, Lillian. She says she knows Louise Hay. So life as metaphor. So we've got these hints and clues and reflections all around us all the time, and we have the ability to pay attention to those things. So it's interesting. I had a little itch in my ear. I started scratching my ear, and I thought, we just need to listen more clearly. So there's another example, you know, my other than conscious awareness was bringing my attention to my ear so I could talk about listening. So so Lillian says, strange, I just see my own comments here. That's weird. Well, you know, okay, so the reason you're not seeing Soul Traveler's comments is because they're on Periscope on Twitter, I guess. Is that correct, Soul Traveler? So you guys are the only ones that are commenting besides Dido. Dido is on Facebook. So you may have seen her comments, but that's why I'm on something called Restream, and Restream collects the comments from YouTube and Facebook and all different platforms if you set it up properly. So that's probably why you're only seeing your own comments. And Soul Traveler says, I try to identify with consciousness and not the body. So Soul Traveler is on Periscope. That's why you're not seeing them, Liliane. Yeah, I identify with consciousness and not the body. And I have to say, presencing ourselves to our body, we talked about this in the very beginning. I think that this is a big deal. I think that a lot of us who are doing consciousness work, so there are a couple of ways that I kind of run against the grain with some of the ways that we move into greater awareness. People talk about overcoming the ego. And I am inclined to befriend the ego. And overcoming the body, I am inclined to befriend the body, to go deeper into the body, to be more engaged in the experience of the body rather and of the ego, like to recognize that these expressions of our lives as vehicles for our experience. And it is the ego that gets us to the place of transformation. It's the ego that brings the awareness and the intention of transcendence. And so by expansion of that awareness of that ego, expanding that ego beyond, that's where we come to a place of transcendence. At least that's my belief, not by denying it and not by killing it, but by evolving it. And so this is also based in my perspective of, instead of the letting go, we're Westerners and we're acquisitional. We collect things rather than we let go of things. And so rather than letting go, what I venture into is expand to include. So rather than letting go of my pain, I expand to include my pain. Rather than letting go of my various identities, I expand to include them all. And as I expand more and more to include all of it, what I become is everything. And that's, to me, that's how we evolve the ego. That because as we expand to include, as I expand to include my being you and you being me, as I expand to include that I am this desk, as I expand to include that I am my darkness and my light, what happens is I become all things. And then the ego, so Soul Traveler saying development of ego. And what I mean by that is, what is the ego? The ego is our identity, right? The ego is who we believe ourselves to be. if we expand and include and include and include and include, ultimately there's no boundary, there's no limit, and we achieve the same objective as letting go of everything, right? Letting go of everything. Nothing and everything is the same. You know, when there's when we are everything, we also are no thing. We are all things, right? So that's where I come from, and I have found that to be more accessible for me. And you're welcome, soul traveler. Yeah, I think by making an enemy of the ego, what are we doing? We're setting up resistance. By making an enemy of the body, what are we doing? We're setting up resistance. And the idea here is to be, I believe that my working hypothesis is that the idea here is to release resistance. So if we expand to include the resistance, if we expand to include all these things, then we're not resisting them. Whereas trying to kill the ego is by nature, it's an obstructive and an oppositional position. And I look to relieve myself of resistance and opposition. So on that note, let us just call it a day. I'm so glad to play with you, and so glad that you guys have been engaged with me and sort of in a way with each other. It's awesome. And I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. I'm here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page every weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And please check out the other programming on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. Really beautiful people, heartfelt, all kinds of great meditations and teaching and exploration. And so you can really enjoy that. And so Soul Traveler is saying, observing the function of ego isn't making an enemy of it. Observing is good. Observing is good. No argument there. And Lillian, I have been painting, but we're going to save that for another day. And thank you so much for asking. And lots of love to you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. And I hope to see you again here really, really soon. Lots of love.